So, what if you could win over 96% of your trades? I know, it sounds almost impossible, right? But today we are going to dissect a trading strategy that claims to do just that. We're going to break down the exact rules, the logic, and the hard data behind this incredible performance. And this is the number that gets everyone's attention, a 96.5% win rate. It's a figure that, honestly, rivals some of the most sophisticated systems out there. And the crazy part is, it's not achieved by trying to predict the future, but by following an incredibly strict, almost mechanical set of rules. Okay, so that P&L, nearly $250,000, is definitely impressive. But that's not what jumps out at me here. Look at those bottom two lines. The absolute worst trade was a pretty manageable loss. And look at this. 0 Widowmaker trades. You know, the kind of catastrophic loss that just blows up an entire account. So right away, you have to ask yourself, how is that even possible? Well, the answer lies in a surprisingly simple idea. This strategy's real power doesn't come from predicting which way the market is going to go. It comes from knowing exactly when to play. The whole thing is built on one core principle. Only place a trade when conditions are, well, just right. Not too hot, not too cold. To really get this strategy, we first have to understand its battlefield, and that's the VIX, the Volatility Index. The easiest way to think about it is like the market's heart rate monitor. When the VIX is low, the market is calm, maybe even a little sleepy. When it's high, the market is panicking. And this slide right here, this reveals the system's secret weapon, patience. It just completely ignores most market conditions. When the VIX is low and everyone is complacent, it does nothing. It waits. When the VIX is super high and there's fear in the streets, it mostly just waits then too. It only springs into action in this tiny little Goldilocks zone between 17 and 19. That's the sweet spot where there's just enough fear to create an opportunity, but not so much that there's outright panic. So, what actually happens when the VIX enters that perfect zone? What does the trade itself look like? The strategy uses a specific tool called a put credit spread. Now, don't worry about the jargon. The simplest way to think about it is like you're selling insurance on the stock market. You sell someone the right to sell you stock at a really low price, and at the same time, you buy an even cheaper policy to protect yourself if things go really, really wrong. You get paid a premium, a credit, right up front. And your goal is super simple. You just want time to pass without a major market crash, so those options expire and you get to keep the entire premium. This slide right here perfectly illustrates the core philosophy. This is a quote taken directly from the system's actual code. There's no traditional stop loss, and you might ask, why? Because the logic is that having an extremely selective entry is way more powerful than trying to manage a bad trade after you're already in it. The defense is played before the game even starts. But that's just the first layer of risk management. See, even within that little Goldilocks zone, not every trade is treated the same. The system has this elegantly simple rule for managing risk. It bets bigger when conditions are perfect, and it pulls back, betting smaller as things get even a little bit more uncertain. Here's exactly how it works. Take a look. When the VIX is right at the low end of the zone, at 17, the system goes in with its maximum bet. We'll call it 10 contracts. But as the VIX starts to creep up towards 19, which signals just a little more anxiety in the market, the system automatically pulls back, reducing its trade size all the way down to just 4 contracts. So the crucial point here is that the risk is adjusted before the trade is even placed. It's all based entirely on the data from the VIX. The system automatically becomes more defensive as the market gets more uncertain, all while staying inside its narrow little operating zone. It's pretty smart. Okay, so let's move on to the exit plan because it's every bit as disciplined as the entry. There are really only 2 main ways a trade ever gets closed. The system has 2 exit rules that are completely non-negotiable. First, it never gets greedy. Once a trade hits 55% of its maximum possible profit, it's closed. Boom. Take the win, move on. Second, and this is so important, it has a built-in fire alarm. If the VIX suddenly spikes up, a huge red flag for panic, an emergency exit gets triggered to cap any potential loss before it can get out of control. And this chart, wow, this tells such a powerful story. Over that entire 6-year period, there were 57 trades. And look at this, 54 of them, 54 were closed simply because they hit their planned profit target. Only a couple expired worthless. And that emergency hedge, it was only needed one single time. But that one time was absolutely critical. According to the performance report, that single hedge activation is the entire reason the system has zero catastrophic losses. It took what could have been a devastating $8,000 loss and slashed it down to a manageable one. That right there is why there are no Widowmaker trades in the system. So when you put all of these pieces together, a very, very clear picture starts to emerge about what makes this strategy work so consistently. It's really not magic, is it? It's just a simple, logical, and disciplined process. You enter only in a very specific environment. You use a trade structure that has a defined risk from the start. You automatically adjust your bet size based on the data. And you have a crystal clear, non-negotiable plan for taking profits and for cutting losses. It's a system of rules, and it's followed without emotion, every single time. Which really leaves us with a final question to think about. This whole strategy shows that phenomenal success doesn't always come from having a crystal ball and predicting the future. It can come from building a system that doesn't have to. It's about designing a process for a very specific environment, and then just having the discipline to sit on your hands and do nothing until that perfect moment arrives. Maybe the real power isn't in knowing what's next, but in knowing exactly when to act.